Hello and welcome everyone to this past marathon analytics edition. We're excited you can join us today for Tony McGovern's session, Spatial Data Analysis in Power BI. This past marathon features back-to-back live webinars delivered by expert speakers from the past community. These sessions will be recorded and posted online after the event. You will receive an email letting you know when the recordings are available. My name is Eric Romero. I'm with Pass HQ, and I have a few introductory slides before I hand over the reins to Tony. If you require any technical assistance, please use the question pane located on the right side of your screen, and someone will assist you. This question pane is also where you may ask any questions. So please feel free to enter your questions at any time, and once we get to the Q&A portion of the session, I'll read your questions out loud to Tony. You're also able to zoom into the presentation content by using the zoom button located on the top of the presentation window. Please note that there will be a short evaluation at the end of the session. This will pop up after the webinar ends in your web browser. Your feedback is really important to us for future events, so please just take a moment to complete this survey. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank our presenting sponsor, Quest. This past marathon wouldn't be possible without their support. If you would like to learn more about Quest and their solutions, please visit the sponsors page in the past marathon website. Explore everything PASS has to offer. Keep learning all year long. Please visit pass.org and check out all the free educational resources available for PASS members. Connect, share, and learn. This past marathon session is presented by Tony McGovern. Tony finds the whole process of discovering, cleaning, analyzing, and visualizing data extremely rewarding. He has both an endless love for cutting-edge technologies and a dogged determination to solve the difficult problems others run away from. During the day, he uses machine learning models and data mining techniques to solve hard analytical problems for his clients. And when it's time to slow down, show results of his analysis, he often turns to Power BI, Shiny, or 3D.js to build expressive interactive applications. And without further ado, here's Tony with Spatial Data Analysis in Power BI. Tony?
Thank you for that kind introduction. My name is Tony McGovern. I'm in Washington, D.C., and this is Spatial Data Analysis with Power BI. For me, my love for spatial data analysis, it all started really with a tweet. DJ Patil, a former chief data scientist of the United States, on Saturday morning, November 12th, 2016, 4 days after the US presidential election, he asked this question, or he retweeted a question that asked, where can one download lower level precinct or county level data for the US election? And I thought, this has got to be an easy Google search. I mean, is it really the case that you can't find out there an open data set with US presidential elections, either at the precinct or county level? I took a look around about 20 or 30 minutes or so and figured out that, in fact, it isn't open. That data is available, but it's not available for you or for me. It's not open data. So that morning, I set a task. I set a goal to try to get that data at the county level because I could see it everywhere. I saw it on the BBC's website, New York Times, The Guardian. That data was available, but it just wasn't easy to get. So with a Python in hand and a few other programming tools, I scraped the data, combined them, and I open sourced that data. And I didn't just stop there. I not only got county level data for the US presidential elections for 2016, but with the help of others, because this is an open source project and it's on GitHub, we got US presidential county level data results for 2012 and all the way back to 2008. And so what's the takeaway? Why am I telling you this story? For me, I think it's integral for data to be open, particularly policy related data. This data is integral for more informed citizenry, for better policy outcomes, and for more accountable and robust democratic institutions. So with that data in hand, I thought, well, let's try to map it. I saw all these beautiful maps on, like I said, like on the New York Times and the Washington Post, and I sought to try to recreate some of the maps I saw online with JavaScript in hand. And about 100 hours later, I was able to create what you see in front of you. Now, for me, what I really want folks in the audience to come away with is, had I started this whole process with Power BI, had I had these tools available, had I known about some of the things that we're going to talk about, some of the map making tools available in Power BI, had I known about those when I began, I would have started with Power BI. This process and this project would have been much easier for me, and I wouldn't have spent over 100 hours culling the data together, creating maps, and creating beautiful visualizations. I really believe, and I hope to convince you during the next 50 minutes or so, that we can do the same things that I've done with Python, with R, with JavaScript. We can do all that with Power BI, with very little code, with no code at all, and still have the same impactful results. So today, we're going to walk through and explore how MapBox and ESRI can help you create beautiful thematic maps, beautiful maps that express great impact and give your audience a sense of what's important in your data. And then we're also going to understand what out of the box tools are available with each service. With ESRI, there are a suite of tools that can help you visualize your data in a more meaningful way. And with MapBox, you also get another suite of tools to help you show your maps and your data much more beautifully and with a lot of style and pizzazz. And so before we move on, I think it's a good time to take a poll. Can we take a poll, a good question here? So I'd like to know, of those folks in the audience, how have you used Power BI to create maps? Have you used Power BI to create maps? Either select yes or no.
Hey Tony, so 50, it's still, people are still voting, but we have about 55 to 57% says no, and 43% says yes.
Oh, great. So we have a really great split here. We have folks who are just being introduced to creating maps in Power BI, and we have others who have created maps before. Now, can we ask a couple more questions? For those who have created maps, have you used the ESRI visual? Select either yes or no.
So far we got 53% no's and 47% yes.
Okay, another pretty good and even split. How about the MapBox visual? Can we ask about who in the audience have used the
Actually,
MapBox visual?
sorry for that. Actually, at the end, 61% voted, and we had 59% said no, 41% said yes for ESRI visual.
All right,
So there you go.
great, okay.
So now MapBox visual. There's still people voting, but majority of the people said no. 80 between 80 and 85% said no, 15% saying yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for taking part in that short poll. This gives me a sense as to where we should focus on today. So many people have never created a map, so we should in the demos today, I will walk through and show you. Once you have location data, we'll walk through and create simple maps. And then many people have used ESRI, and the majority looks like haven't used MapBox. And that'll, when we go through those demos, I'll make sure to show how to use those services to the fullest extent. So as I made maps and got location data together, and I've been using these services, there are 3 lessons that I learned that I wanted to share with you that I think can help you create more beautiful maps and perform more impactful analysis quickly and robustly. And here they are in order. Lesson number 1, use MapBox or ESRI ArcGIS. These 2 services in Power BI are available for free and allow us to create unbelievably beautiful thematic maps. And if our data are robust enough, give us a wide range of tools to map data and to do some fairly good and robust analysis. And so today I will, through the demos, I'll work through both the MapBox and ESRI ArcGIS services and show just a little bit of what they can do. The second lesson that I learned is get good data. Now, I say this a little bit tongue-in-cheek because as data analysts, as data scientists, as business analysts, the vast majority of our time is getting, cleaning, and transforming data. And so this idea of getting good data, it really doesn't exist. But what I want to try to convey today is that there are a lot of tools out there that help us, particularly when it comes to location data. And I'm talking about boundaries, and I'm talking about point data like latitude and longitude. There are really some great tools out there that help us get our messy, untidy, and misunderstood location data and make it come alive. And so I'll briefly highlight some of the services and tools that I like to use and that help me get the most out of my location data. And the third lesson that I want to convey to you that I've learned and really internalized is this idea that we can do a lot with the out-of-the-box analytics that both the ESRI ArcGIS service offers and the MapBox Visual offers. When it comes to creating choropleths, which is just a fancy way of calling a map, there are really just a lot of great things that are available with both services. And I'm going to show briefly again some of the things that we can do, from heat maps to clustering to showing boundary data through diverging scales with color. And so I hope to be able to show a lot of these different mechanisms and tools just out of the box. So what is ESRI? For those who haven't made maps before or haven't heard about ESRI ArcGIS, ESRI ArcGIS makes the spatial world go round. They are one of the premier spatial companies in the world. More often than not, if you're looking at a map, if you're using a GPS service, if you get FedEx packages, chances are that that service or the maps that those products run on are made by ESRI. The shapefile, which is a standard format for creating maps, that shapefile is an ESRI product that came about many years ago. ESRI is everywhere. It's a ubiquitous service and company, and it's embedded in many maps that we've come to know and love. MapBox is one of the newer entrants, newer companies to enter the map making world. MapBox makes the spatial world more open. They've really have been super aggressive in making their services and their maps open source and they make a lot of great products that give us the ability to combine a lot of different tools and do a lot more with our location data. I took this GIF somewhere online. I'm not really sure what it shows. It's downtown San Francisco, and it might be, you know, it's a 3D extrusion map, and it might, I don't know, it might show how inexpensive San Francisco is. The height of the height of the bars show how expensive rent is in that area. That's my theory. I'm going to show you ESRI ArcGIS Visual. I'm going to show boundary data, how I'm going to take some polygons, put them on an ESRI map, and throw some color on it, and that'll convey a whole lot of meaning for us. I'm also going to show you with the MapBox Visual how we can take point data, in other words, latitude and longitude data, put it on a map, and then also add in some really interesting layers. What you see in front of you is real-time fire 911 calls in 2018 for the city of Seattle. The city open sources their data. They make it data freely available for everyone to download and analyze. And so I've taken that data and put it in a MapBox Visual. But I don't know if you can tell, but one of the layers that I've put on the map is buildings. All the buildings that are in downtown Seattle are also being shown in this visual. So I'm going to show you quickly how to use a service called MapBox Studio, which is a great service that MapBox offers, and get some of this data. You can get all the buildings in Seattle and use that as a layer. You can get all the roads, the major roads in Chicago, and use that as a layer and put it on top of your map. So I hope to be able to briefly show you how I created this map and how to create layers in MapBox Studio. And as I mentioned already, as a bonus, I'll hopefully show you how to get this open source data, which is build a map of every building in America. About a month and a half ago, the New York Times had this beautiful spread in one of their Sunday issues, and it was essentially a service by Microsoft. They use AI and machine learning through satellite photos, and they literally took pictures of every inch of United States, and with AI, they were able to figure out where all the boundaries for every building in the United States, where they lay. And they got that data and they made it available. They open sourced it. And so I went on their GitHub repo. I downloaded certain cities and states, Washington, D.C., you saw Seattle. And I uploaded some of that data into MapBox Studio and created a layer and brought that into Power BI. I'll briefly show you how I do that. So let's get into it. Lesson number 1 that I learned, use MapBox or ESRI ArcGIS. So I am going to demo very quickly a map that I made in Power BI using the ESRI ArcGIS service. Excuse me. So here we are in Power BI desktop. I want to show you how quickly and easily making a map of using ArcGIS, ESRI ArcGIS can be. The first thing we have to understand is that with the ESRI ArcGIS service, it comes already installed within Power BI desktop. So in other words, if you download one of the later versions of Power BI desktop, install it on your machine, you'll be able to see this little icon here in the visualization pane. This is the ArcGIS maps for Power BI. This comes again pre-installed and preloaded in our Power BI desktop. And what I've done for those, and forgive me, I should have said this on the onset, most of the data that I'm going to be showing is US related data. So I live in the United States. I live in Washington, D.C., the nation's capital for the United States. And I'm familiar with a lot of data from the United States. So forgive me if you're watching from elsewhere, from Europe, from Africa, from Asia, and all you see is US maps. That's what I'm familiar with, and that's what I'll be showing tonight. So in front of us, what I'm showing is a map of the United States of the lower, what we call the lower 48 states. There are 2 states that I'm not showing. This is the results of the 2016 election. Here in our political system, we attribute colors to our 2 major political parties, one red, one blue, and the way we vote in this country, we do it at the municipal level, at a county level. And so this map in ESRI shows about 3,142 boundaries or counties. And so I got this data, again, from all that scraping I did and from my GitHub repo. But in this instance, what I've done is this county level data, I use Power BI to connect directly to GitHub and get the data and download it. And here I'm just showing 2016 election results. And very easily and quickly, I'm able to create this map on this unique ID, which I'm calling GeoID, but essentially it's a unique identifier for each one of those boundaries for each county. Now, if you have polygon data, if you have boundary data, ArcGIS does wonderful work with that data. Essentially, let me just quickly show you what that looks like, this county level data. What ESRI ArcGIS service does is when you create a map and you have a unique ID for a boundary, and here these boundaries are counties in the US. If you're lucky enough to have these unique identifiers in your location data, then the ArcGIS service, the ESRI ArcGIS service, does a really great job at figuring out where those boundaries reside and will map them for you. Let's take a sneak peek at some of the offerings in this ESRI ArcGIS service. And so part of the reason I was able to map all 3,142 counties very easily in ArcGIS, I'll give it a second to load, it's taking a while, is because I was able to define a location type. And here, because I have those unique identifiers for each county in the United States, those unique identifiers really represent boundaries. They represent these polygons within the map. And ESRI has this great interface where you can tell it, hey, look, I've got boundary data. It really is only in one country, it's the United States. And this is really, really cool. It's this idea that I can define different levels of granularity for my boundary data. These aren't cities that I'm showing. These aren't what we call census tracts. These aren't states. The United States only has 50 states. Here I'm mapping, again, over 3,100 different boundaries. I'm able to just select, and ESRI offers me this idea of, okay, what are you trying to map? What's the level of granularity? And here I chose counties. And it gives us, an option. Sometimes when we have unique identifiers for our boundary data, it doesn't exactly line up. Boundaries change over time, unique identifiers change over time. And ESRI does, again, a fantastic job of parsing out the data we have and figuring out, okay, what is it that we're trying to match? And here, like I said, all I've done is download the data from GitHub through Power BI, through Power Query, making it available here, and just throwing the ESRI ArcGIS service on top of it. Let me get back to where we were. And I should mention, I know there are probably a lot of questions regarding what we're showing and what I'm demoing today. Well, I'm going to save enough time at the end to try to answer those questions. So MapBox layers. So now that we've seen just a little bit of what ESRI can do, I want to show you what MapBox can do similarly with the same data, but just a little bit different. So to get MapBox Visual into Power BI isn't as straightforward. It doesn't come preloaded with Power BI Desktop. It is a custom visual that you have to download from the Microsoft App Store. And hopefully, I'll give it a couple of seconds to load up, and hopefully there won't be anything wrong with it. And so for those who aren't familiar with the Microsoft App Store, I won't go into it here, but essentially if you're downloading any custom visual, there's a gallery of custom visuals that you can download by just signing into Power BI Desktop with your Microsoft account and going into the App Store and choosing the one that you want. And so off the bat, what I like about the MapBox Visual is that it gives us great flexibility in terms of styling, in terms of the look and the feel of our maps. Again, here I'm just creating thematic maps on election data. Again, the election data that I scraped together, put on GitHub, and I've downloaded through Power BI. Here I'm showing election results for the state of Wisconsin. And this is again for the 2016 US presidential election. And before we go into what this shows, I just want to show you that some of the attributes that the MapBox Visual offers. What you see before you is a style that I created in MapBox Studio, and I'll get to that in a second. But one of the important things that we have to recognize is that once we download the MapBox Visual, it just doesn't work off the bat. We do have to sign up for a MapBox account. Totally worth it. I think it's one of those services that is increasingly, if you're making maps, is a must-have. And once you sign up for the MapBox Studio service, which is www.mapbox.com/studio, you sign in, you create an account, and you get a access token. And this access token is really how you unlock the potential of the MapBox Visual. Here you can see, here's my plan. I have some access tokens. I'm going to have to reset that now. And it gives me a sense as to how many people are taking a look at my maps. I've created and shared through the Power BI service. I've made available some of my maps, and it looks like I've had over 6,100 views since mid-October. Most of those views are me and my mother. We're very proud of my work. But this is a service that's absolutely fantastic, and it's something that you need in order to make the MapBox Visual work. So it's mapbox.com, and it's called MapBox Studio. And once you have the access token, you can use some of the styles that come with MapBox with the custom visual. Here I've decided to use MapBox Studio and create my own style, map style. This is a custom style which I like. It has a lot of nice colors and boundaries and water mains that I think really bring this map to life. And I've added some other layers on top of it. And so I'm going to show how I create that in MapBox Studio. I'm going to quickly show how to create a style with the MapBox Studio service. What's great about a MapBox Studio is the idea that if you can create these styles, you can really control and fine-tune to the lowest granularity. You can really make your maps look really, really cool. And what I've done with the styles that I've created, I have a few here. You can start with a basic one, or you can start with a template. And so I like starting with a template. I like to see what others have done. And there are a couple of them that really speak to me. There's this vintage map that someone has painstakingly put together, and I'll create it very quickly. They've painstakingly put together and made available, and it's an absolutely beautiful map. And I won't go through what you can do, what the different things you can do, but you can see there's, it's really cool the types of maps you can create. And remember, once we go in here, create a style and add layers and mess with colors and other things, once we publish this, we can make this map available in Power BI Desktop. Let me get out of here. And one of the styles that I like is someone put together a North Star, what they called a North Star style, and I've used that pretty extensively as my style. So that's one way to create a style. Other features within the MapBox Visual that I really like is that you can set zoom levels, you can center the map in different places. And here I'm showing a choropleth, which gives me the ability to show color on a map. And within the choropleth, this is a really, really cool feature, absolutely brand new. It's only a few months old, but it's this idea that you can show 3D extrusions. Basically, usually we see our data on just a couple of dimensions. Here, the MapBox Visual allows us to show our data on another dimension. Because I'm working with voting results, US presidential election results, I can usually, when we show maps, we can show who won and who lost certain counties by color and the magnitude of color. A bluer county shows that one candidate won, by more than, say, a redder county. And then, so you see, Wisconsin has a lot of colors in between blue and red. Well, what's great is that because of 3D extrusion, we can also see the magnitude of these wins. There are some counties in Wisconsin where one of the candidates won by not only by a lot of votes, they won the larger share of the votes, but it shows you how many votes that they won by. And so this 3D extrusion, I've seen the MapBox folks, they've put together bandwidth, they put together maps of the state of New Jersey that shows bandwidth penetration, basically how fast is the internet in certain municipalities in New Jersey. And you can, the sky's the limit in terms of how you can use these 3D extrusions. You can pitch, and you can play with the height. It's a really, really cool feature. Another cool feature that MapBox offers is this geocoder. So essentially, if you have an address that you'd like to search, you can just start punching it into this geocoder, and MapBox allows you to search that address and pinpoint where that address is. Here I'm showing where I am currently, which is in Washington, D.C. I also want to show what MapBox can do with location data that's point data. So I spoke briefly in the beginning of the presentation. I showed a GIF of Seattle 911 calls, real-time calls with a couple of layers. The one is the data layer, which is the actual data itself. And the other layer were all the buildings in downtown Seattle. Here I'm showing a MapBox visual with the same style that I used in the other visual, the other report. But here, instead of boundaries, I'm actually looking at points. Right now it looks a little cluttered because I'm showing a year's worth of 911 calls. But if I start this play access visual and start going day by day, you can start seeing, hopefully in a little bit, here we go, you can start seeing all these 911 calls and how they're in a heat map in the MapBox visual. And while that's playing, let's see if I can show how this heat map is created. So essentially, there's another setting within the MapBox visual, that's the heat map setting. And again, because my data is point data, it's longitude and latitude data, I can literally and physically put points on the map and show them over time through this visual. There are some properties that you can set on this visual that give you that allow you to show the intensity of the data and show how big and how much the data are clustered around an area. And speaking of clustering, what's very cool about the MapBox visual is this idea that you can set zoom levels for different types of analysis. And so what do I mean by that? So again, I have a MapBox visual that shows 911 calls. It's point data, it shows actual longitude and latitude, and I'm playing it over time. So each day is progressing, and for each day you can see where these 911 calls originate. And this is at a specific zoom level. So the closer we get in, the more we can see a certain area, and particularly with buildings there, we can see where those 911 calls originate. But what I've also done is put in a cluster analysis. I've aggregated, and if I zoom out and cross my fingers, I hope this works. Yeah, here we go. So that's really cool. I'm letting the play axis continue to play. It's progressing along every day, and I'm showing some ancillary data or some other views of the same data. But here we've switched, because I've zoomed out enough and I've set the zoom level at a large enough number or a small enough number where this is showing clustering over time. So basically we went from a heat map to zoom out to a clustered map. And basically this is showing aggregates. This is showing total counts of calls. And if we zoom in, this will once again switch to a heat map. Really, really cool stuff. Now, I don't know if you noticed something. The buildings went away. Again, this is another really, really cool and powerful feature of the MapBox visual, which is you can set zoom levels on your data. You can say, hey, I want to, if you zoom out enough, I would just want to see, clusters. If you start to zoom in, I want to see a heat map. But you can also set zoom levels on actual layers for your map that are outside your data. And here, if I start to zoom in even more, you can see the buildings appear. Again, this is another really cool feature of the MapBox visual. So how do you do that? How did we get the building data? How do we get those building footprints into the MapBox visual? Well, let me show you quickly how I did that. I'm going back here into MapBox.com, into MapBox Studio, and I am going to go into a place called Tile Sets. Here on the upper right-hand corner, we have a menu of options. One is styles, and I just quickly showed how to create a style from a template. Oh no, by the way, I did miss a big feature. Well, now that we've created a style, how do we make that available into Power BI? Here, we click on this menu. We click on the style URL. We can copy it. We go over into our MapBox Visual, and where it says style URL right here, this is where we put in the style that we've created. So let's go back into the tile sets. Tile sets are vector or raster data that allow you to zoom in at many different levels. So what does that mean? I think for our purposes, what tile sets are different layers that we can apply to our maps that show different levels of granularity. So for instance, there are some tile sets that MapBox Studio offers right off the bat. They have something called the MapBox incidents. They have MapBox traffic and terrain. These are all just simply layers on our map that show different levels of granularity. And some other layers that I've had to get on the internet, download, and make available into MapBox Studio are Chicago major streets. The city of Chicago makes available all their major streets in a specific file format. I downloaded that and I uploaded it into MapBox Studio as a tile set, and it does all the work for me. I've downloaded census tracts for different states. I've downloaded the map buildings, all the buildings of certain states, Washington State, Maryland, Virginia, so on and so forth. So let me show you really quickly how I did something like that. So here's the GitHub repo that I mentioned. This is US building footprints. This is Microsoft, again, using AI and machine learning and satellite imagery. Really cool stuff here. By the way, all the sites and the links that I'm going through in this demo are available in my presentation, so you can take a look at these later. They'll go through some of the methods they use, the machine learning methods and AI methods, to try to get all the building data. Here's the really cool stuff. Here's a table laid out by states of all the buildings within that state. Here I'm going to just show District of Columbia. It's going to download. I'm going to save the file. It's a zip file. So I've already done that previously, and I'm going to show you what's in that zip file. It's a format called GeoJSON. GeoJSON is a popular way to show spatial data and boundaries and different layers of maps. And with this District of Columbia GeoJSON, I'm going to go back into MapBox Studio. I'm going to click on New Tile Set. It's going to ask me to select a file. We're not just limited to GeoJSON, though this is what I'm using today because this is the format that I like to work with, and it's a very popular format, and it's the easiest to work with. I will select that Washington, D.C., if I can find it, District of Columbia GeoJSON, and cross my fingers. I will confirm it, and then it will upload it. And then again, MapBox Studio does all the magic. It'll convert that GeoJSON file that I just downloaded, and process it, and make it available as a tile set. Well, I've already done that for Washington, D.C. It's this tile set right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this tile set, and I'm going to go back into my Power BI report and Power BI desktop. And because I've chosen and let's see, we put that tile set in, oh, excuse me, I've skipped a step. That's right. This District of Columbia building footprint layer is now automatically available to me in my styles. So I can go back into the styles, and I've got a style here that I've called a map of every building. This is something I created. And because it's a tile set in my MapBox Studio, I can add it as a layer. And so I click Add as Layer. I click on Select Data, and then just give it a few seconds, and some data sources will appear. And for the sake of time, I'm going to skip over that, but this is essentially how you select your tile set and here it is. Here's the District of Columbia tile set. It'll show you what that layer contains. You can add it as a layer and then make it available in your style. And once you've made it available in your style, again, you can use this menu button, click on the style URL, and then place it back in your Power BI report, and it becomes available. We have about 14 minutes left. I will talk through the last 2 lessons that I've learned. Get good data. We'll skip over a couple of these things. The one thing I do want to highlight is if you do have location data, this is a great service. It's called Smarty Streets. Smarty Streets is an API that I really like. And if you set up your API correctly, you can send your location data. And if you're like me, most of the location data that you work with is dirty, it's incomplete, or it doesn't make sense. Smarty Streets is a fantastic service. It's not free, but it does have a sort of freemium model where you can send this API single addresses, bulk addresses, and it'll give you a lot of information about the location that you just sent. And I've built Power BI applications where I send it my location data to the service. It parses that data and brings it back. Think of it as like Google Maps API or the Bing Maps API, but a little bit more robust. Lesson number 3, use out-of-the-box analytics. So I've already shown heat maps in the custom MapBox Visual. Again, with these heat maps, you can set the intensities, the colors, you can set different zoom levels where you can, if you zoom in and out, these heat maps go in and out. So essentially, all of a sudden, my heat map changes into a cluster map once I zoom out at a far enough zoom level. Boundary data, we went through the MapBox Visual and showed how extrusions can show data on yet another dimension. And so what did we go through? What did we learn? Again, lesson number 1, really vitally important if you're trying to map data in Power BI, is use MapBox or ESRI ArcGIS, both wonderful services, both available for free. ArcGIS comes baked into the product, into the Power BI desktop product, so there's not much you have to do to make that work. MapBox, it does require you to open up an account with MapBox Studio. Again, vitally, I think, well worth it. Lesson number 2, get good data. Again, if you have location data and it doesn't make sense to you and it has longitude and latitude, Smarty Streets is a way to go. Also look at Bing Maps API and the Google Maps API. They provide a wealth of information, and you can easily set up a call from your Power BI application to work with that data. Lesson number 3 is use out-of-the-box analytics. I spent a lot of time showing the MapBox Visual because of the poll that we took in the beginning. Most people had not worked with MapBox Visual, and so I wanted to show really what was available in there, what kind of styles you could create, how you can upload tile sets, and how you can work with zoom levels to show different types of analysis and different types of map aggregations. And I wanted to show a bonus lesson. Use Twitter. Now, why do I say this? I don't know if you remember, I started out this presentation by saying DJ Patil, former chief data scientist of the United States, asked, where can you get this information? And as you can tell, I don't know if you can see right down there and below, that's my avatar. That's me replying. I think about a couple of days later, no, the day after, I put together this GitHub repo. I had scraped all this data and made it available and open sourced it. I think what's great about Twitter is it connects all these data visualization, data scientists, Power BI aficionados together, and we talk with one another on Twitter. Another thing about Twitter is that it really connects folks who are new to the game. This gentleman, Graham, I met in Washington, D.C. He came to a meetup where I was presenting. I was presenting on maps, and he really took to what I was saying during the presentation, and he went out and tried to recreate some of the things I did. And Twitter was really a mechanism for he and I to talk with one another and for others to look at our conversation to chime in. And what's great is that he tweeted at me. He asked me for, a couple of, some suggestions and advice on some of the things I had said. And a couple hours later, he came up and created a beautiful map in Power BI by himself. Here you can see the building data, and he's got some points that are highlighted in there, those red dots. And this is really the power of Twitter, combining, getting this great community together where we share ideas and we share our results. But seriously, use Twitter. It's a really fantastic tool. Here are some resources of some of the things that I've talked about during this presentation. Smarty Streets is on there, MapBox Studio, the other GitHub repos that I think are super helpful. If you have location data, poke around in some of these services and some of these links. They are bound to help you tremendously as you create your impactful visualizations. And with that, I want to thank you for listening and taking part in this presentation. I'll hand it over, and if folks have any questions, I'm here to help.
Hey, Tony, thank you so much for a great presentation. We still have another poll if you wanted to deploy it now.
I think we're okay. I think given the fact that most, about half folks, so basically I'll let the audience know what that poll question was, which is, has anybody used machine learning with their maps? Given that half folks haven't created a map in Power BI, I think I think going the machine learning route is just a step too far right now. But I'm happy to answer any questions about how to integrate R with Power BI and particularly use it with maps if anyone's interested in asking those questions.
Okay, well, I don't see any questions coming through right now. Probably people are taking it in. I would like to remind everyone that if you wanted to get a hold of Tony's slide deck, they are now available in the Past Marathon website. So if you go into his session, you'll see the accompanying material at the bottom. And I think that's it. Tony, thank you so much for your time and for a great presentation.
Okay, thank you.
We have, stay tuned everyone for our next session, Getting Data Driven on a Budget with Julie Heyman. And thanks again, everyone, for attending. And Tony, thanks a lot for your time. There's Tony's information if you wanted to get a hold of him. Reach out to him directly. And thank you, everyone.